Found a short 12-chapter manga you may like. Bibliomania. It's short, I'll bookmark it. My friend and I send each other recommendations and share our respective opinions with each other all the time. One of those recommendations he sent me was for this manga called Bibliomania. Now, I didn't immediately start reading it as I was going through Mysterious Girlfriend X at the time. Started out okay, then got whatever by the end, new fetish unlocked out of 10. I would have moved on to Sing Yesterday for me, far better romance manga, Midwest emo out of 10, but my friend chimed back in. He yet again suggested that I dive down deep into the rabbit hole that is Bibliomania. So I did. This is the title page of Bibliomania. It being the title page, it was naturally the first thing I saw of it. The cover to anything is your first impression, and a good one is capable of capturing, in one succinct visual, what the thing is about, while also capturing your interest. Take something like Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Without any context of what it is, it's hard to work out what this game is even about. And is not particularly interesting as well, with it just being a portrait of some guy with nothing much going on. Bibliomania though? This is a good cover. It's a beautiful illustration depicting a little girl experiencing her fair share of body horror, which will be experienced more of in the later pages. And the tone is captured here as well. This cover is unsettling. This little girl is being horribly disfigured. Tentacles, teeth, thorns, decay. Yet, she's smiling. A little further in and we're hit with an oddity. As it can be read, this work deviates from the manga norm, in that it's read left to right as opposed to right to left. I primarily read manga, so this was a bit difficult to adjust to. I'm used to reading comics from right to left, so it took a chapter or two to properly adjust. The first chapter begins with a brief section of something we don't yet understand fully what is happening. As someone or something is monologuing about being hungry, we see this monstrously large egg structure and terrified people trying to escape from something, with the sequence ending on a destroyed naval fleet. It is pertinent that I should talk about the length of Bibliomania now. The manga itself is short in length, as there are only 12 chapters, with slightly less than 300 pages total. This would otherwise be a brief read if the beautiful art didn't demand you stop, stare, and take in the art we are being treated to. This page, detailing several warships torn asunder, welcomes us to Bibliomania. From that introduction, we're dropped into a girl waking up into a white void, containing nothing else but a door labeled 430. We're just gonna be left here with the manga telling us, don't worry about earlier, here's this little girl. Isn't she cute, don't you think so? And she is. Her design is very simplistic, and yet it isn't kept boring by giving her the massive bow that looks like rabbit ears and those hair curls. That bow is real cute. Attempting to leave through the door, she's stopped by Serpent. Serpent, as a character, it sets the tone for Bibliomania. He's a little goofy here with his interactions with Alice in this chapter, but it wasn't until the conversation with my friend from earlier that I was able to put it into words what makes Serpent's design a microcosm of the tone. Everything is off. All the elements are things that are familiar, and yet nothing is as it should be. In his words, it's a snake, but snakes don't have teeth, nor are their eyes off to the side. It's a subtle, uncanny valley. In addition, it is generally pretty easy to tell someone's emotions. Happy, sad, angry. Serpent, on the other hand, is impossible to read. It's hard to tell what Serpent's intentions, emotions, or thoughts are, and the more you look, the more unsettling it gets. It's at this point when both Alice and we, the audience, are introduced to the rules of this space. Rule number 1. Every guest has a number. Alice's is 431. At 666 guests, a party is thrown. Between the number of the beast and serpent being, well, a serpent, the biblical references here should be fairly obvious. Serpent isn't really being presented as the most trustworthy of characters. Rule number 2. A guest mustn't leave their room. To keep a guest satisfied and complacent, every desire the guest has is satiated. Rule number 3. The only way out is room 000. Leaving your room causes your body to rot. The further you are from your room, the faster the rot infects the body until you die. Alice, not interested in some party, interested more in the outside world. makes her way to room 0. And with this, Alice travels through various guests' rooms. I won't be going over every single guest she encounters, but I will go over 2. The bird of room 413 and the dining table of room 285. The way this manga is structured is that, for a while before there's inevitably a twist, Alice will enter into another guest's room, in this case falling into it and onto the bird. And with the progression of rooms results in a progression of the rot taking claim over more of Alice's body, in this case her arm. I could have used any of the other guests to discuss the structure, but the 2-page spread along with the art present in the rest of this section is what really hooked me into Bibliomania when I first read through it. So I wanted to highlight this before moving forward. It's an imaginative and unique design and situation that left me wanting to both flip to the next page and keep looking at the same panel for longer at the same time. After entering, we learn about the inhabitant of the room. Room 413's guest wanted to escape from the horrors of war and found happiness in being a bird. Any of the guests could be used to discuss Bibliomania's themes, including the bird, but let's take a trip down to room 285 to discuss that. Alice's rot has only gotten worse, with it now taking claim over the right side of her body. The guest, prior to being a guest here, led a miserable home life. His family left and he fell into alcoholic abuse to cope and to escape his struggles. Now that he's a guest here, he can use this room to fulfill his desire of a perfect home life. A place where reality never betrays the ideal. Alice sees this and can't accept this rejection of reality. You call this life? You call this living? If nothing else, he does. And herein lies a major theme in Bibliomania: escapism. Every guest utilizes their rooms as an escape from real life and reality. Rather than struggle on, looking for a way to improve their situation in any way possible, they fall deep into an escape. The guests are satisfied from the lies that they craft and repeatedly tell themselves, rather than face the truth, becoming a monstrosity of their former selves along the way. Having read up to this point, there's something familiar about this story. I feel like I recognize it from somewhere. Charles Dodgson was born into Victorian-era England. Growing up, he had 10 other siblings, 8 of whom were younger, and he would often entertain them with his jokes and writings. He became an adult and became a deacon, and that love of entertaining children and the experiences doing so stuck with him. He befriended the dean of Christ Church, the college that he worked at, and would entertain the dean's children, notably Lorena, Edith, and Alice Liddell. Charles Dodgson would show a story he was working on to Alice, who encouraged him to publish it, and he did. He published it under the name of Lewis Carroll. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published in 1865 and was followed up with Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There in 1871. Even without ever reading the books, you know who Alice is. You've heard of the March Hare and the Mad Hatter, of the Queen of Hearts and the Red Queen, of Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You've heard of Alice falling into a rabbit hole, having a strange adventure through Wonderland, going from one meeting with a group of characters to meeting another, only to then wake up in the end. It is highly unlikely to have gone to this video without having heard of Alice or hearing the references to her adventures. Alice and the associated cast of characters are some of the most prevalent characters in media. There are several adaptations of the story across several mediums and countless allusions to Alice and the associated cast as well. Chances are, if you ever see a rabbit in any piece of entertainment, it's either an Alice in Wonderland allusion or a sex thing. Sometimes both. The characters and imagery from these stories are iconic. They're constantly being borrowed and repurposed and referenced. Constantly. And Bibliomania is no exception in the repurposing of Alice in Wonderland. Bibliomania is a reimagining of the story Alice in Wonderland. Not so much Through the Looking Glass, so that won't be talked about. To explain how it's a reimagining, I will need to discuss some later events, so I'd advise reading Bibliomania for yourself and then coming back. Bibliomania primarily draws the structure and core premise of Alice in Wonderland and not a whole lot more. A little girl named Alice falls into Wonderland. Wonderland's counterpoint would be the world inside the book. Finding herself in a world of fantasy, Alice must now find an escape. On her adventure, she meets the residents of this wonderland, before eventually finding her way out. This is where Bibliomania deviates dramatically from its source. Whereas a lot of other reimaginings will borrow characters and imagery from its source, Bibliomania doesn't. The closest Bibliomania has to borrowed imagery is the Executioner from Room 430 in the Queen of Hearts, off with their heads and all that, but that's where similarities end. All the guests are unique characters completely divorced from anything Alice in Wonderland has to offer, to instead tell its own story with its own themes instead. And that's one of the fantastic aspects about Bibliomania. There is zero reliance on pre-established imagery or motifs. It is able to create its own imagery that is strong and can stand on its own. Every single one of these chapters has at least one visual attached to it that sticks with you. Another aspect that Bibliomania draws upon from Alice in Wonderland is all the body transformations. In Alice in Wonderland, Alice's body shrinks and grows and her neck becomes massive, and it's all very whimsical. It's treated in a fantastical and fun manner because it's a children's tale. Alice in Bibliomania also goes through her own fair share of body transformations in a much more gruesome manner: the rot. By room 268, Alice's entire body is overtaken by the rot. She is disfigured and monstrous, and every second of her existence looks like pain and suffering. She returns back to normal thanks to the guests in room 255. Once we hit the chapter Run Toward Death, shit starts to get real. By room 254, her arm rot returns. Room 237, her leg becomes disfigured. Room 220, she's barely recognizable as a human. Room 176, she's truly monstrous. Once she reaches room 99, does Alice truly, finally succumb to the rot as it overtakes her body and kill her. Except, that's not where the story ends. She does die, but Alice's arm starts moving, and Alice starts to get up, free from the rot. And the look that Alice gives the serpent when she's standing back up is truly haunting. And that's where I'm gonna leave it. If you didn't go and read this when I suggested to back when I gave the spoiler warning, hopefully this will result in you doing so. There's still a lot I haven't discussed. I didn't talk about all the guests, nor what the deal with Serpent is, nor what the party is, nor what the deal with Alice is. I probably haven't even discussed a third of the content Bibliomania has to offer, so there's still a ton there to read and absorb. Bibliomania has a lot of qualities to it that I really like. It's beautiful, it's surreal, it's gruesome, it's unsettling, and there's not much like it. I would highly recommend seeking out and reading this story.